So he was my, he was my rock. He was the mentor. He was the guy that I looked up to. Nothing against my father at that point, right? When I said, hey, how can I be a better father? How can I be a better ex-husband? How can I set myself up? And it was that transition saying, well, all the people I've seen that were happy in my life that I've ever been surrounded with have been Latinos and Latinas. Mm-hmm. So I took some of that methodology and mentality as well. When I went into Instagram, her account was already logged in. And that's where messages were going back and forth.
Gotcha.
So I knew about this, and I knew about things that were happening for about 6 weeks before I told her. So I can get everything.
How in the world for 6 weeks did you not say anything?
Well, and I will say this, make sure you feel comfortable with your therapist.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, 100%.
And that's something, as a new person, I didn't really know. I just was like, hey, they're local. I can drive there. I can do my therapy, and everything will be good.
Welcome back to Behind the Filter. Well, today I have a special guest and friend. Met on social media, and it just took off from there. So we're going to dig into lots of topics. But first, I want to introduce you to Ryan Sueda. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here.
Kind of crazy, as you mentioned, how we met through social media. So it's kind of weird how the universe puts people in your lives.
I know.
And we get to explore that for the next few episodes.
Yeah, we actually just met on social media and just struck up some conversations just about working. And so got connected in terms of just, I guess you can say, like putting some ideas out in terms of like your brand and what you're trying to do in the future. And then we met, and then we ended up having like a 2-hour conversation. And after that point, I was like, you have to be on my podcast.
Absolutely. So again, appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
And look forward to digging into this over the next few episodes.
All right. So I just want to kind of like start to dig in terms of like who you are, where you came from, like all the things before we get into the 50 million topics that I'm going to have to cover with Ryan, because Ryan's going to be on this podcast multiple times. We have lots of things to talk about, great topics, especially when it comes from a male's perspective. We're going to try and break things up just a little bit here. So are you originally from Indiana?
So no, I'm not. So originally from Buffalo, New York area. And the reason we say that, anytime somebody says New York, you assume New York City, right?
Well, yeah, so, I'm originally from Brooklyn, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So really small country town called South Dayton. And that's about 45 minutes southwest of Buffalo. So the upbringing was country. I mean, we had nothing but farmlands around, and this kind of shaped who I am and kind of the struggles along the way. So backing up to that, had a mother and father, and they did a fantastic job raising us in that area. But then as I grew up and, was married to my ex-wife, we realized that wasn't the area we wanted to be in. So the school that both her and I went to, we graduated with like 46, 48 people in our graduating class.
That's it?
That's it. And that encompasses a large area per square mile.
I feel like there was like 1,600 in mine. I went to really, really big high school. Well, not in New York. I was in San Diego, but wow, that's crazy. So it's like everybody knew everybody.
Everybody knew everybody. Not a lot of people left to go out. The ones that did, right, wanted a better life in certain aspects.
Yeah.
Right. So I have a lot of people back in that area that live a very happy, healthy life. It just depends on what you want. Right. So that kind of shaped, I would say, how I got to Indiana. Which was money, right? It was career change, it was money, it was a better opportunity for my ex-wife and my kids to have a better lifestyle. And part of that is because of that area. If you're making 35 to 55 grand individually, you're doing okay. You can still buy a very big home there, 150, 200,000. There's not even a stoplight or a blinking light in my town. We have the old Dutch Amish with the lanterns, so it's a very step back in time place.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted. So what happened was, met my ex-wife, high school sweethearts, got married, and I had some property and still have some property in Western New York that we sectioned off and put a house on. And, if we were smart, we would have listened to the banking people and said, hey, this house for your budget and your income is a little outside of what you can afford. But, we wanted it. So we went through with it. And what changed for me, and we'll get through this in the stories, was my wife and I had, ex-wife and I had one child, and another one I think was just born. I don't remember the whole when it happened, but there was a program called Women, Infant, and Children, WIC program.
Yes.
And then we got groceries and things subsidized from that. But I remember going through Walmart and getting the rest of the groceries. We didn't have money in the account to buy the groceries. So thank God, beautiful humans exist. Somebody paid for our groceries.
Wow.
But I remember going back and seeing the look on, my ex-wife's face and just defeated, right? Like, I'm a man, I'm supposed to provide. This is what I've always learned to do, and I didn't do that because of X, Y, and Z. I wasn't making enough money. So I specifically remember that point being a turning point where I went from like, hey, being this loving, caring individual to I need to make money, I need to provide. And that's where you start honing skills. And we kind of talked about how, success in business and success in life, sometimes you have to really make dramatic changes.
Right.
That also comes at a consequence sometimes as well. So, grew up, divorced family. They co-parented quite well. My father lived across the street from my mother for a while, but still in a very small town, so we could get back and forth once we moved to another home.
Oh, that's good. So even though you guys were coming from divorced parents, like the family life was still sort of intact, kind of?
Yeah, it was as much as it is, right? It was the old school traditional divorce. My mom worked very hard, so did my dad. So my grandmother did a lot of the babysitting while, she was working. My grandfather really stepped in a lot, did a lot of the fishing and activities that really became core memories for me.
Yeah.
So that's why he's actually tattooed on my chest. So he was my, he was my rock. He was the mentor. He was the guy that I looked up to. Nothing against my father at that point, right? But my father was working every other weekend. We'd only see him every other weekend. I apologize. But that's where I got my love for music and music therapy was from my father.
Yeah.
So, I think everybody just kind of parents on how they were parented. They didn't quite understand certain things. Mental health wasn't a big thing. I'd say maybe some of the older generation was a little more rigid, a little more structured in certain ways, and unempathetic. So you see that, and it's kind of like, man, looking back, I don't want to parent that way, my kids.
Were you kind of just like told to just like either like deal with it or just not express your emotion?
Never specifically told not to. It was just kind of what I've seen, right? So with my mom being a nurse for the state of New York, the prison system, so to speak, my family were all corrections officers, so in the prison system as well, with inmates. Never really seen much emotion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, never
absolutely.
seen much emotion. My dad had a lot of trauma in his life with his mother, brother, and father passing away. Brother was in Vietnam. Unfortunately, father signed the papers before he was 18 to go, and he unfortunately passed away in Vietnam. Wow. So he passed away. The father became an alcoholic or continued alcoholism and died of cirrhosis of the liver. And then the mom, years later died of heart disease and things of that nature. So he had 3 very heavy deaths in a very short time.
Yeah.
So he was very, rigid, stoic, didn't show much emotion. So as a male figure in my life, that's what I kind of modeled myself after. And my grandfather was the same way.
Yeah.
Very, very rigid, verbally abusive to my grandmother. And so you just kind of learn those things because that's what you're surrounded by.
Right.
So again, it goes back to you absorb what you're around. I don't know if you believe in thing called mirrored neurons, right? Same thing. You're basically who you hang around or the environment you're in is what you become.
Right.
So,
and then you also think it's like once you're in that environment, you kind of you're like, this is normal. Isn't this the way everybody lives? Because I know that's what happened with me with things that had happened to me while I was growing up. Like when I started to meet other people from other different walks of life, different areas, different cities, and then I tell them my story, they would be like, are you serious? And I'm like, what? Isn't everybody live like this?
Right, and that's kind of what happened, right? We move out, and this is back. I don't even know if Instagram was around, but Facebook was big, 2004, whatever, and that's how people kept in touch. And that social media was like, oh look, X, Y, and Z moved away, and they're doing successful. So that kind of gave everybody, I would say, in that area, visibility besides physically going and oh, okay, there is other things out there to do. And I'll be honest with you, we've had a lot of people, both, as I said, friends that I have around that area, very successful in the area, but then also very successful outside that area. So it's amazing to see that opportunities everywhere. if you take the initiative.
Right.
So my initiative and my ex-wife's initiative was, hey, it's not about us, it's about our kids. And in that area, where's a better opportunity? Indiana, I had a buddy that still close with down in Bloomington. Moved down here because I was a big deer hunter, and there's big deer down here, and that's actually why we came down originally. And I had a job offer out of a company for Chicago handling this area, so that's what brought us down. Was originally deer hunting, but it's worked out fantastic, and I wouldn't change a single thing.
So how long have you been here now in Indiana?
So on and off, honestly, 9 years maybe.
Okay.
When I say on and off, my career. And then my ex-wife's, like, we moved down to Fishers off 116th Street.
Yeah.
And we just had to find a spot. So we ended up there, and she didn't have a job. She actually lived in New York for a couple months until she moved down Mother's Day. So we didn't realize how much childcare was here at the time. And it was like, holy hell.
Yeah.
Like, how do people afford this? So she was a teacher and still is. But for a while, she actually just went and became, I don't know if it's a preschool lead or daycare or whatever, because her salary plus our kids got discounted or free. I don't remember daycare. So it was huge. So we lived in Fishers, and she ended up getting a teaching job down in Brown County in Nashville, Indiana.
Wow. So you went from
so that's
Fishers is here, Nashville's down there.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. So I stayed up in Fishers. She would wake up Monday morning, drive all the way down there, and then I got an extended stay hotel, and they would stay there Monday through Thursday night, work Friday, then come back.
Wow.
So we did that for 3, 4, 5 months, and it was just unsustainable.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's accurate, 3, 4, I can't remember. But I do remember we ended up buying a home in Franklin. So we lived in the home for a while, and then, again, the money thing came up, and I had an opportunity to live in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. And we're like, hey, this is great. We can be closer to family. We'll move there. Put the house up for sale. Didn't realize it was going to sell so quick. So within a day, we had multiple offers.
Wow.
So we had to move out, and we ended up having to move back to Nashville for 3 months in the same extended stay hotel, full-time, until we moved over to Pennsylvania. And, like I said, life teaches you a lot of lessons, and that lesson was, chasing money. Because we moved to Pennsylvania, we were miserable. Hated it. People were great, just not our state, not our place that we felt comfortable. And Indiana, felt like more home, unfortunately, than New York.
Yeah.
So got with a new company. They moved me to Avon. Had to live in an apartment again, 3rd floor, and then made the transition to Brownsburg. So my kids went through 5, 6, 7 technical moves in 5 years.
How was that with them? Because what ages were they when you were doing all of those transitions?
Gosh, my daughter's 14 now, my son's 12, so I'd say he was 2, she was 4, somewhere in there, yeah.
So little.
But that's all they ever knew.
Right.
We moved away from our only support network in New York. All our family's still there on both sides, so we knew nobody besides my buddy. So yeah, that was another life lesson that you just don't realize. You move away from people, you have to remake those connections with new friends. You have to do a lot of different things,
which is obviously hard to do when you keep moving to different places.
Bingo, right? Yeah. So that's the lesson there was, okay, now that I in my head reached a certain level of success, I promised the kids, hey, I'll get you a big house with a pool and a bunch of acreage and puppies. I don't know why that was, one of the top topics, but so moved to Brownsburg, found a beautiful home, in this beautiful subdivision. It's a little private community, and had the whole, what everybody wants to say, keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
We made it.
You had all the things.
Yeah, had all the things, and what you fail to realize is the other things that you're giving up because you're achieving a goal based off of something you promised yourself at a house in New York that you never had.
Okay, I want to pause right there.
Yeah, because we jumped way ahead.
But that's a really good point, though. You reach this level, right? And then you're like, I've made it. I have all the things. I'm providing for my family. I'm being the man that I need. But at what cost? What, with all of that, did you see? Because obviously you guys had to do tons of sacrifices.
Yeah. So to back up a little bit on that was, I transitioned. this sounds egotistical, but I've been very successful in my career. And every jump I've made has been very successful and lucrative for my family and I. So the unfortunate part is once I became a sales manager, now when people leave, you have to backfill that position. So what happened was I became a sales manager. We had people leave. We had the COVID. We had to lay people off.
Yeah.
It didn't change my goal, right? So if I had, say, a $15 million goal and I had 5 people, each person has to hit 3 million, I'm still responsible for 15 million. So I have to make sure they're all doing their job. Well, when there's nobody, that 15 million becomes Ryan Sweda's responsibility. So there was issues, right? And I've talked to you about I had alcoholism on both sides of my family. I was depressed. I had issues with alcohol. I was verbally abusive to my ex-wife. And on top of that, I traveled like crazy because in my mind, a promise I made was I would never allow that hurt that I seen that day, right, from my ex-wife. So that's all I was driven for. I set the bar so high that that's all I wanted to achieve
kind of
was financial
blinded
success.
you in all these other areas.
Bingo, right? So, I'd come home and the house would be a little dirty, but I didn't take into account that she ran the kids all week to their events or their sports, or she had a job, right? So you mix that with being depressed with alcohol because, hey, I'm depressed. I'm leaving Monday, getting back Friday. I'm not seeing my kids. I'm only talking to them for 5 minutes on the phone. You compound all that stuff and look at yourself and go, shit. Well, while you're looking at yourself, you got to remember there's other people looking at themselves saying, is this the best situation I want to be in for how I feel?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, me not being there, the alcoholism, the verbal abuse, that allowed her the opportunity to, again, have different people come in and the divorce happened and she moved on to work with her life with somebody else.
Yeah.
And, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, now what, right? Everything that I've worked for in my life, in my head, what's my purpose? What am I doing?
So it's like now you have the house, you have all the things,
bingo.
But now you're getting a divorce, so now you're like, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
How did you start over with all of that? Because in anybody else's mind, it's like you have everything, right? But once that all hits the fan and then you go through that divorce, I mean, I've gone through a divorce as well. And so it's like you literally hit rock bottom and you're like at this point where you're just like, who am I? I have to like rediscover who I am. I have to go into therapy. I have to do all the things. Like, how did you handle all of that?
Well, it's rough, right? So again, I met her, we were together since we were 14, 15, somewhere in there, 22 years, right?
Yeah.
So we grew up, and there's things that she'll know about me that no one will ever know, and vice versa, and that's beautiful in and of itself.
It is, yeah.
I have no ill intent. I still talk to her. We co-parent really well. So I really genuinely want her to be happy. Now, of course, in the beginning, you have those feelings. You have those like, God, spite, what the hell? But you have to look at yourself and say, okay, what did I do in this situation, right? And I think a lot of people have that misrepresentation of themselves. They want to victimize the other person, or demonize, I should say, the other person. And, you do that a little bit, but then you have to be real with yourself. And I think that's that tipping point where you look at yourself, and whether it's a spiritual journey, mental health, emotional journey, there's all these things that kind of go through your head. But for a while, you're just numb. And my biggest thing was, okay, as you pointed out, okay, I have this house now. I got this huge house. It's got a pool, and it was barely used when 4 people lived there. Now it's going to be a 50-50 split. I'm more worried about the negative outcomes versus the real positives that happened, right? So when you look at positives, and we will go through, I'm traveling, but now I got to be home 2 weeks a month because I have my kids.
Right.
So why is that a negative? Because now I'm actually being able to spend quality time with them. But in order to do that, you have to figure out, hey, I'm not emotionally available. I'm not, because I'm stoic, and I've learned that. I've had to learn all those things, and we'll dig into how that happens. But that was a very difficult thing to understand. Like, hey, my purpose was this for how long to provide. And we had made the typical mistakes. Hey, we want a new car. Do you want the X5, BMW? Oh, no, we like it, but we want this type of vehicle. The depreciating assets were one of those things where it's like, hey, looking back, okay, it was fun, but it's all material things.
Yeah, none of that stuff matters.
No, as you get older, around 38, it's like, I thought I made it, and there's people way better off and way more wealthy than me, and there's people that are less. But it's funny, we had this conversation in a roundabout way. You look at most of the happiest people, right? And we talked a little bit about this. It's funny because when I grew up, I was very successful in baseball on a high school and a collegiate level, to the point where I played with a lot of Latino players. And I always admired and kind of took to that, I'd say vibe and that kind of ideology that they never took anything serious.
Yeah.
Even in baseball, and even to the point where I was still playing 35 plus here in Indiana with some Latino guys on the team. It's amazing to see, again, when you surround yourself with people, if you hit a hard line drive to left field and you fly out, the Latino guys are always busting on you and saying, man, but you crushed it. And other people are just sitting there, they don't care. It's a selfish thing. Mm-hmm. So you look at the happiness level and you look at who's in the parks on a Saturday cooking with their family, who's having fun, whether it's the money one, it's not about that.
Yeah.
We talked about some of our common friends that we have. And Dreamer, I see on his Instagram that he's very big on that family aspect. But you don't see that from other, I don't say ethnicities or cultures, so to speak. It just seems to be Latinos and Latinas. So that's the kind of interesting thing that has drawn me to that, methodology of how, one of the reasons, when I said, hey, how can I be a better father? How can I be a better ex-husband? How can I set myself up? And it was that transition saying, well, all the people I've seen that were happy in my life that I've ever been surrounded with have been Latinos and Latinas. Mm-hmm. So I took some of that methodology and mentality as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of ways.
That is, yeah. When you think about it, the way we grew up, we do, family is a big thing for us. For me specifically, family, our family now is small.
Sure.
And I just say because there's some dysfunction more so on my dad's side more than anything, but I think for us, we had always struggled, and I've had periods of struggle in my adult life, and I think it is coming back to that knowing, growing up, I didn't have a lot, but it was okay, and it was fine. So it's I knew what it meant to have a lot, and I know what it is to, have nothing, and being happy and having nothing is way more peaceful, I feel than having everything and being completely miserable in that situation. And that's the one thing I have learned. Now it is okay. I shop at the dollar store and I'm perfectly fine with it. And it's great and it's fine and it's amazing. And my ass has been on a budget because I'm a business owner and I had to start all over again multiple times in my life. But it's okay. I now know I don't need the purse. I don't need the jewelry. I don't need all of those things.
Sure.
But I think it's also because of the way I grew up that had that effect on me too.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, as I said, things were different in the 90s or 80s, price-wise and things of that nature, I'm sure. You talk about the family dynamic. It's interesting because grandmother and grandfather always had the big, Easter and Christmas dinners and Thanksgivings. And then you kind of look, and once that one grandparent passes away, how that changes. And then the kids, the grandkids, so to speak, and they all start getting old and they start saying, hey, I want to do more of our own thing.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas in different cultures in Italy and all that, you live close proximity to your family and that family unit seems to be big. And I'm not, again, don't want to generalize
this is
everybody, every white
lives
person.
On a street.
Exactly.
And the houses are right next to each other. It's great. We just pop on over all day.
So that's amazing because, that I think that's one thing as I look back and continue to look forward is, and we'll get into all this stuff and, you learn love languages, right? You learn different things, you learn your attachment styles, but that quality time has become very important to me. And that's a struggle sometimes because my quality time of what I would say may be different than yours, right? We could hang out and that could be quality time to you, but I want to do some more. And it's like a drug, right? Once you get it in the love language or in how you want to receive, you become addicted to it.
Yeah.
So then you have to curb that addiction. Going back to the family atmosphere, you didn't appreciate, or at least I didn't, appreciate what was happening around me with my grandparents and all that stuff because it was shit, we're going to grandma's house again. It's hot, it's tight, it's the same relatives, it's the same bullshit stories. But then you look back and then
You're
you
like,
don't
damn,
realize.
I wish I had more time.
Right, exactly. You look back and say, man, my father's 78, my mom's 68, my uncle's up there, and it's like, you ain't got much time left. You don't realize again, it sounds stupid, I'm 38 with kids, but shit, in 4 years, my daughter is graduating.
Yeah.
She could legally get a permit next year, from what I understand, in Indiana, right? So it's like, life ain't slowing down, it's only getting faster.
I know.
And perception of time, as you get older, from my understanding, it just goes even faster.
Oh, yeah, it's like in a blink of an eye.
Which, yeah,
It's
that's
insane.
concerning to me. I mean, that's concerning to me, so.
So you go through the divorce. I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
with your divorce, because we both obviously have gone through those.
Yeah.
I knew for me, obviously, there's lots of factors, and you try to take ownership and accountability for, the things that you have done. And I know for me, it was a process in terms of like going through therapy. I'd go through therapy sessions. There was multiple books I was reading, all of these things, because I was also unveiling all these things that happened in my past.
Sure.
That kind of affected how I was reacting to things like presently and in the future and all of that stuff. But there was times where I would have these like aha moments, and then it was in that space where where the divorce after divorce, like everything's like super hot, super touchy with the conversations and the communication.
Yeah.
But there were moments where I was like, I need to call this person and I need to apologize for my part in X, Y, and Z, because I now realize what I did in that situation was wrong, and I need to call and apologize.
You meant
And,
your
like,
ex-husband or people in
like,
your life?
No, I.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
Jesus.
there was so much to a point, and I think that it's in regards to a lot of like the work that you do after a divorce, because obviously right away you want to blame somebody wholeheartedly 100%, but then you also have to take a look kind of like and assess yourself in the situation, realize, okay, I've done all these things wrong as well.
Correct. Yeah.
And so for some reason, for me, I felt like I'm such like a processor and communicator that I have to like verbally talk to the person and be like, okay, this is what I realized 2 weeks ago, and I'm sorry for whatever this happened 10 years ago. And then,
Yes.
like, did you have that when you started kind of like going through
Oh,
all of
Christ.
that process?
I still get it, right?
Yeah,
So,
same.
yes and no. So this is. So during we were kind of more roommates, right? We were intimate roommates. There was love there, but it was a different love toward the end of the relationship. It was a love by convenience in some areas, and I mean convenience, and nothing's convenient in that regard. And that's a word I throw around and I need to change. But there was love there, but it wasn't worked on. It wasn't identified. It wasn't that. So,
well, and that happens so much in marriages,
Well, you grow apart as
Yes.
well, and it's tough because looking back and you look at that and say, okay, I'm at peace with that. The crazy part is I hate social media. I do. I think it can really skew people's reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. You and I or somebody will talk, and next thing you know, there's some targeted ad towards you.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking about you're
Literally.
going through divorce, all of a sudden your whole feed's about you deserve better, and it's like,
Wait till
okay.
we're done recording this podcast and you open up your phone.
Yeah, I can't wait, right? So, that's why I'm trying to keep it positive. I want good shit in my feed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting because of how I found out about the other person in the life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had that feeling. I have kids, and they understood because they seen messages pop up. But I didn't really know what was happening until I went and was going to log back into Instagram on my computer upstairs. Well, when I went into Instagram, her account was already logged in, and that's where messages were going back and forth.
Gotcha.
So I knew about this, and I knew about things that were happening for about 6 weeks before I told her. So I can get everything.
How in the world for 6 weeks did you not say anything?
Well, it was already announced that the divorce was coming, and my biggest thing there was the kids need somebody to talk to.
Whew, I would have just lost it if like.
Yeah, it was difficult, but again, I'm not like a lot of people. I can take a lot in. I've been in a lot of dark places in my life, and I will pull myself out of them. So my biggest thing was still, okay, how do I make sure the kids are taken care of?
Yeah.
I need to figure out my financial situation. I need to actually still figure out her financial situation. Because unfortunately, you and I are empaths, and no matter what, we still believe in a karmic law. We still
Right.
believe that if you're going to shit on somebody, you're going to get that back to you. So all that stuff was going on in my head. Like, okay, I knew it's done. I know she wants to be done with it. How do I make this a situation that's advantageous for everybody? So regardless of what's happening, it doesn't change the outcome of what she wants, what I want.
Right.
And
It's like a mute point. Like there's just no purpose.
yeah, and as you go through after this, and we'll go back to, what you'd say 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because then those insecurities come out with the next part or next opportunity. So yeah, going through that stuff, making sure everybody's okay, making sure the divorce agreement was advantageous to both. It took a lot. That took my energy. That took my time. And I had a career that still took my mind away from a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right. And she would sleep upstairs. I'd sleep downstairs. But she cohabitated with me for a couple 3 months until we figured out where the kids could go and stay in a safe area while still being in the school district.
Yeah.
So the home, my home's still their main address and where they get on the bus and all that stuff. And she wanted to live in the same school district.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, people hear the story and they go, how did you do that? And I think it goes back to making sure it's not about you.
Exactly.
Right. And it's tough because, yes, I do have an ego. Right. And I had to always have an ego. I always had to be in control. My childhood was one where, I was mouthy when I was a kid. My mom kicked me out of the house. I had to live with my dad. He worked, and sometimes I'd have to work overtime, so I would just kind of walk around the streets of the hometown, which, you have to identify people and say, okay, is this person a threat? Is this person somebody that has good meaning, bad meaning? And you have to learn to read people. You have to learn to read their energies.
Right.
So I got really good at a young age, controlling my environment, protecting myself, putting up these walls, which led me to be successful in sales and other things.
But it blinded you in other places of your life.
Absolutely. And I think everybody's guilty of that until they have that aha moment. So like I said, when you look at the positives of the divorce, I'm back to now seeing my kids 50-50. I'm home in Indiana. And as I'm home, the more I want to be home. Younger, I love to travel. I got to see the world. I got to go all over the U.S., Canada, Europe, and very fortunate for that. And I still love to do that, but in smaller doses.
Yeah.
Right, in smaller doses. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how, as you were mentioning, getting back to how do you do that, and how do you look at that situation and be calm and cool? You're fighting like hell inside.
Yeah, you are.
It's like,
for sure.
Like they say, the duck looks calm on the top of the surface, but it's paddling like hell underwater.
Oh yeah.
Right. So making sure everybody's okay was my biggest thing. But then that's where you have that first time where you're at your house by yourself.
Yeah.
The kids aren't there, and you're like, okay, I got a amazing therapy type dog, a Rottweiler, and I'm like, all right. Well,
isn't that the weirdest feeling, to be in your space and it's like different?
It's dead. It's calm.
And then you're just like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? Like, it's just it is the most eerie feeling at the beginning until you start to kind of hone in and kind of get yourself a little bit grounded in that.
Yeah, so the thing is, the day she asked for divorce was funny because I then felt a relief and I didn't drink, right? And for 10 months, 11 months, I didn't feel the need to drink. I didn't have any relapse. I didn't have all that stuff. So you look
so
at
that
it,
just automatically stopped?
Well, for me personally, I was like, all right, I just need to stop drinking.
Okay.
I knew that. And I'm like, all right, so I was already on a health journey. I was 283 pounds. I was miserable. I had a trainer out of Barstow, California. Still have him. And I was making changes to my lifestyle early December before the a couple of years, 3 years ago now, when the divorce was announced.
Yeah.
And I was turning that part of my life because I was miserable with myself. So that was the first step, looking at me like, okay, at the time, knowing the divorce is coming down the road, I need to change my lifestyle for my kids. And everybody says, hey, I'll die for my kids. And I would say the same thing. I still would, but will you live for your kids? Right? Will you take accountability?
So good.
Yeah, will you take accountability of your life? And I remember telling my ex-wife, I don't care if I live or die. I don't care. I'm just a piggy bank. I'm your bank account. I die, you get the inheritance. You get the life insurance. So that was the mentality of power of money, power of being a supporter just on a financial aspect when that's not what they wanted, but that's what I built in my head they wanted.
Gotcha.
Right? So, yeah, it comes down to communication. It comes down to, honest communication, honestly. I mean, because we can communicate all day, but until you really get deep and really project or say what you mean,
Right.
It may not be true, right? And we talk about, or we will probably talk about projections. And
Yeah.
like once you get to a certain level, you go, man, that person said that to me. They're hurting.
Right.
Instead of
exactly.
like, fuck, man, I take that as a personal attack. They're
Yeah,
like,
and then you're
are
like,
you okay?
no,
Like,
that's not me, that's you.
Yeah.
You can catch that very quickly.
Yeah,
afterwards.
after a while, you start catching that quickly. So once that was announced, the divorce, I found a local therapist, and I will say
I'm glad
that.
you're bringing that up because that's the next thing I wanted to talk about was
What's that?
just therapy in general with males. I think women are very quick to go to therapy or to reach out for different forms of help in terms of trying to heal, go through processes of, past trauma and that kind of stuff. And I feel like males, you don't hear it as often when like they need it just as much, especially going through a divorce and going through other things. So was it easy for you just to be like, I'm going to go get a therapist?
For me personally, it was, right? For me, for a long time, I realized, hey, I feel stuck. I don't know why. But that's the beautiful thing. You don't need to know why.
Yeah.
Right? You just need to know you have to take a step. So the thing I'm most proud of is, I didn't know where the end of the stairway is, and I still don't know. But I took that first step on a stairway that may not have an end.
Yeah.
Right? But I took that first step. So taking that first step, I found a local therapist. And I will say this, make sure you feel comfortable with your therapist.
Oh,
right?
yeah, 100%.
And that's something, as a new person, I didn't really know. I just was like, hey, they're local. I can drive there. I can do my therapy, and everything will be good, right? But it depends on the interaction you want. Do you want more of a person that's going to be lab-based or, sitting there and just taking notes and then you're like, fuck,
very like analytical, logical
yeah,
person.
but it's like,
But you're like, no, but I need feedback. I need you to
Right?
talk me through all this.
No shit, right? Like, hey, I'm paying you. You tell me something.
Yeah, exactly.
But when they're writing down and they look up, they go, and you're like, fuck, now you're questioning, like, did I
what
say
is
this
it?
right?
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. As an overthinker, sometimes you're
exactly.
like, I am fucked up, see? So yeah, it was very interesting to see that and realize that person did help me dramatically because I was open, honest about who I was.
Yeah.
I went in there and said, hey, I lost a marriage because I was so money hungry. I lost a marriage because I was an alcoholic. I was verbally abusive, and that's what I know. I know my family trauma, generational trauma that I know we talked about getting into.
Yeah.
So it transitioned to therapy to then I didn't like the clinical setting. I didn't like the, hey, I'm writing shit down and I'll see you again for another $180 without feedback.
Right.
So funny enough, I was kind of sitting in my car the one day outside the house in the garage. I'm like, okay, I remember this woman, that son, because I coached baseball, and she was a behavioral science major. I'm sorry, Dana, I'll probably get this wrong. But she then, weirdly enough, people come in your life, I just hit her up on Facebook Messenger. I was like, hey, here's my story real quick. I know you were in behavioral health and behavioral sciences and, behavioral therapy, and she wasn't in the clinical setting anymore. So that was interesting to me.
Okay.
Because I truly believe the system is broken, mental health-wise.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about psychiatrists that come in and will see you, and for 5-6 minutes, you talk about psychologists that will come in and talk to a patient, and they may see them 3 times, and they say, oh, your workload's too high, here's a new one, we're going to shift them. How do you build that trust? How do you build that rapport? How do you actually say what you should say and feel like you're being heard and represented?
Yeah.
So the beautiful thing is the 2 people now that I have in my life as therapists both went through that clinical setting, both went through a place where they both go, I see the billable hours, I see certain things, I just want to remove myself from that situation, either be my own therapist for my own practice, or just do something on the side, and that's what I do with my life coach, and she's been with me for 2+ years, and it's beautiful because being As everybody says, being a man, being successful in certain areas of your life, you have an ego, you have a drive, you have that. You're not going to fail mentality, right? And I always told people that I've never failed. The first thing I ever failed was my marriage. But I'll tell you, after the marriage failed, I have failed fucking millions of times, and that's where I've had the most growth, right? So
that's so good because it's so true. In all of the failure, that's where the growth comes from.
Sure.
All of those pieces.
If you're willing to listen to them,
right? Exactly.
Right. If you're willing to listen to them and understand, okay, what is the universe? What is spiritual? Whatever you believe in is what you believe in, right? I'm just telling people how I got through things, right? And some analogies that I've used. But the biggest thing is always understanding doing the right thing is not the wrong thing. It's never the wrong thing, right? So doing the right thing, calling people, that's on your conscience for some reason.
Yes.
Right? So I just had that feeling just recently where I had to reach out to somebody and apologize. Because right after the relationship, mutual friends, there was a woman that I met. Bubbly, type A, amazing person, right? Amazing human being. Me just getting out of a relationship, I'm ready, right? Like you're not, yeah, I'm ready for it. But totally different ideologies of what was happening. And the thing that stuck with me is she's like, I felt like I was taken advantage of. I felt like you used me.
Wow.
And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me. And then you get through that and you finally reach out and say, hey, listen, I apologize. I understand that. That's never my intention. I apologize. Never my intention, but I understand why you feel that way, and I truly apologize. And that release or that acknowledgement was beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? It was beautiful. So, you kind of learn things, and then when you think you know something, you find out you don't know anything. And my therapist, the male therapist I have, as I said, I have two.
So you have a male and you have a female.
I have a male and a female. I call her my life coach, whatever. But it's beautiful because she helps me on the feminine side, so to speak, because I am very harsh with my words. Being in management and being like leader my whole life was always harsh. Like I mean well, but it's like if you know how to do something and somebody's trying to do it, you're just like, fuck, let me do it.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of harshness. Like, why did you do it this way, right? So learning to be empathetic, being softer, letting that ego go. And then on the male side, I still have to have that. I still have to have that for my job. So I found in working with her, she did so many amazing things for my life. So many amazing things. And I was killing my ego so much in some areas and not monitoring that I started seeing my work slip because I wasn't as competitive. I wasn't as this.
Wow. So it's like you're doing all this work and it's great, but then now you're like, oh crap, now I've done it too well in this area that is now overlapping when I need to be a little bit more, direct or efficient in this area of my life. So it's like trying to balance out all of those things.
Bingo, right? And, then you go from being this stoic, rock hard person to being like almost too much in your beta, energy and feminine energy where you're getting, you're watching a freaking Pixar movie and you're crying. You're like, what is going on with me? Right? So, I don't know why that's funny. That's it. I mean, there's beautiful movies from Pixar. Up always gets me. But, so I kind of looked at that and said, okay, I need to balance this. And I truly believe this. And as a man, there is nobody in this world besides your father, as a man, that wants you more successful than him. There is not a single man. I don't care. I have great buddies. We're still competitive on a lot of things. And they're more successful in a lot of areas than me, and I love them dearly. But you always have to have that drive as a man.
Yeah.
Because that's what we live off. We live off of what's our purpose, money, providing, so to speak. And it was interesting, like you got back to, most women will go to therapy first. Generalization, I know, and I apologize, people. But, typically the men are doing the hard labor jobs. The buildings, the bricklayings, things like that. Not to say women don't.
Right.
But you see more of the empathetic, the emotional things. The therapists, most of them are women. Teachers, nurses, things of that nature. So I had to learn as well, women. I had to learn empathy. I had to learn how women work, and they're based more off emotion. We're based off of logic.
Right.
So all these things come in, and that's why I looked at my situation and said, okay, I'm too far this way, in my opinion. I need to go this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to balance that, right? But how do you balance that without overdoing it?
Right.
So when I started with my life coach, it was weird because I started Project 369 and also shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, therapy. And on top of that, I'm healed, by the way, at this time, right? So I'm like, yeah, bring it all on. And it got to a point where I'm like, overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You're overwhelmed. You go, I'm just doing too much,
Mm-hmm.
not allowing myself the grace to see how far I came, right? So I'll just say an analogy of like I was a fat guy wanting to get to a Greek god body,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so fixated on this end goal that I didn't see all these little steps along the way that I've achieved. And now looking back, it's like, man, how do I live in the present?
Right.
How do I live in the present every day? Not as much worried about the past, and those creep in, right? I'm a human,
Yeah.
right? Those insecurities sometimes creep in. And then how do I not look too far away? So, I've had to really learn that. And the best way I've learned, and this was just recently by my therapist, was like, just do the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to focus on. Just do the next right thing in your life. Doesn't mean it's going to be 10 years from now. Today, what are you going to do the next right thing, right? So my biggest thing I've been focusing on for mental health wise is giving compliments to people, at least 3 a day. Whether it's, hey, you have a beautiful outfit, nice shoes, whatever, right? Because there was times, like I said, I pulled myself out of a lot of dark places. I did it all myself. I didn't have, yes, of course I had my parents, but I had no one else around.
Yeah.
Right? I wasn't with a significant other in the beginning of that whole transition and, transient in the dating world at the beginning. It's like, okay, if I give good to the universe, again, karmic law, I will get something back. Mm-hmm. So I made it a point. I don't know how their day is going, but God, if you can make somebody's day better just by saying something nice, why wouldn't you?
It's so true. If people compliment or do anything, it changes your day around.
Well, sure.
100%.
On both sides.
Yes.
On both sides. And you have to watch the tone too. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, how you doing? No one cares. Hey, how you doing today, right? So you learn as well. It's a learning experience as well. So yeah, I'm really big, and I force my kids, and I don't like forcing, but I force my son. He's a little quieter side. My daughter's more like me. When we're in a Kroger, like, hey, you have to go say something. Like you have to just to break that in.
I love that.
So I love the fact that I have these two different therapists, life coaches, whatever in my life. Well, therapist for one, life coach in the other. Mm-hmm. So much so that my kids both go to the same life coach as me. She comes to my house. She works with them. I've seen amazing things with my daughter and my son. So yeah, I'm beyond proud of who they are and what they've seen, what they've went through, but still be positive, happy kids. That's where you kind of look at that next thing that's right in your life. And I look back and go, I don't like to look back too much. Well, some people will disagree with that. But, yeah, looking back, that's why I know I did things the right way, in my opinion. People could say whatever, but I put my kids first. Yes, I had to swallow my ego. Yes, I knew things that that tore me apart inside. But it's not about me.
Yeah.
Right? I had my opportunities. I had my life. At that time, I'm 35, 36 when the divorce happened. So you look at it and go, okay, it's not, they didn't ask to be put on this earth. They didn't, come 9 months ahead of time and say, hey, when you and Dad, bring me into this world, right? So that's the goal. That's the priority. And that's that thing when you look for in a partner, it's like, how do they treat their kid?
Yeah.
Do they have kids? Do they treat the people less inferior than them? A waitress, a waiter, a clerk, something. How do they treat them? Right? So those are the beautiful things that you learn just by, again, being open and honest with yourself.
What would you say to men who have they're either going through your situation that you have gone through, or they just haven't, they've pushed everything off to the side, they've kind of let everything kind of just fester, per se, and they have not taken any of these steps to address anything in order to move forward on their lives, and they don't want to, what would you say to get them to be like, bro, you need this?
Well, so you said something very important is if they don't want to, it's not happening, right? It's not happening. No matter what situation I've been in, being an empath, you always want to see what's happy for people. And, everybody that's been in my life, you look at and say, hey, I've been in similar situations. You should do this, this, and this. A, their journey's different.
Yeah.
B, if they're not ready to do it, they're not going to do it. And you can't push them, because what happens, and I've had this happen before, is you push too much, it's obviously a negative reaction that they're going to cause, but it may send them in a path that they're not ready to take, honesty-wise and
Right.
accountability-wise and other things going on in their lives. So that's the first thing. If you're not really willing to admit who you are, what you are, because your body's always going to tell you, hey, go back to that safe comfort spot.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. This feels too good. Like this is not what we want. All right, we want to be comforting. Whether you're a man, woman, kid, everybody, especially today's society, in my opinion, with social media, women, right? Like, you already have standards that are hard to achieve with AI and Photoshop and these things. And that's why I believe social media is killing kids. Body image and mental health image. I don't know your age, nor is it any of my business, but do you find that to be something where you look at it and, okay, I'm a beautiful woman, but man, this woman's similar age on Instagram, and look how she looks.
Oh, yeah, women all the time.
Yeah, so that's
always.
That's a very concerning thing.
So hard
right?
on ourselves.
And it's same with men, right? And I think men won't say that, but yeah, we have insecurities. We have things that we want to feel special about. We want the women to initiate sometimes. We want so many different things, but again, it comes down to, are you open and honest with yourself to know who you are? I don't think you really ever can say, I'm this person through and through, and no, because you're going to have things that come in and change that a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you don't evolve, you die. You don't evolve, you die.
I love that. That is so good.
Well, good.
No, that's good, because it's really true. If you don't move, and if you don't evolve and you don't grow, I mean, what is your purpose? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're doing the opposite. You're not living.
Yeah, bingo, right? And so, me thinking I'm living by making money and having these material items, that's not living, because we never really went on vacations. We never spent quality time together as a family. So you ask most women, hey, what's your love language? More times than not, you're going to hear acts of service, right? You ask men, it's going to be physical touch, right? So that's kind of those things you look at and go, man, that guy's quality time and words of affirmation.
Those are mine.
You look at it and you go, wait, what?
Quality time, words of affirmation are at the top for me.
Yeah, so being, empath and all that stuff, obviously you didn't get a lot of attention on the emotional side, and obviously the quality time was
100%
things. So being an open guy and understand that, then once you get to that point, you go through therapy, you make it yourself, you learn the love language, you learn the attachment styles, you go, okay, I want to be loved this way. Is this person emotionally available to love me this way, or at least be willing to work on it, right? So somebody really told me, wait for the right person, but don't wait for the right person at a right time. Because again, not everybody's going to be perfect. Right? The biggest thing I can say about being perfect, because that's what I always tried to strive to be, is, and that ego got killed and everything, was being perfect to me now means asking for help, being able to take that help when offered and needed. And as long as you do those two things, you're always working toward a better self, a better version of yourself.
Right.
So that's important, because, as I kind of mentioned, with men, we have to be warriors. I don't care what anybody says. We talked about the competition. No, we have to be warriors. But we have to also be able to control that. And that's where, as I kind of mentioned, I had difficulties. My whole life was go, go, go. Let's not. The ego's there.
Yeah.
I'm Ryan Sueda. I don't care what you say. I'm going to do it my way. And then you realize, well, everybody's superior to you in some way. You know something about something that I don't, and I can learn if I just take a step back, be humble, be meek, and listen. That's the thing. So, yeah, men are supposed to be warriors, right? We're supposed to, and that's, you look at Gladiator, you look at all these movies. That's what we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And we do need to be that way. I firmly believe that.
Oh, yeah.
But I also believe that
he's giving us this sign.
we're getting the hook soon. I also firmly believe that you have to keep that under control.
Yeah.
And so you talk about, hey, when would you tell a man, or, hey, bro, you need therapy, right? The most beautiful thing I ever heard is, if you get on the wrong train, make sure you get off the soonest stop for the return trip, because the longer the trip, the longer the return trip is. So the longer you keep pushing your stuff to the side and not dealing with it, the harder it's going to be, the more
Yes.
detrimental it's going to be.
And it also comes out in different ways that you had
for sure.
no idea would happen. And it's like, it's just like this roller coaster that just never ends, unfortunately. If you decide, no, I'm not going to do therapy, I'm not going to do something to, better myself, or I'm not going to unveil all of this crap so that I can move forward in my life, it's gonna either impact like your family, your friends, the people that you're dating, your life in general, your work life. Like, it's gonna come out in some form, and it's not going to be positive.
Yeah, exactly. And positive energy, positive forms. It's sad because if you're not true to yourself, you're only hurting and bringing shit into your next relationship.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that happens, right?
Yes.
Either you evolve or you die.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, we're gonna end on that one. Either you evolve or die. Oh, can you do the puzzle thingy on TikTok? TikTok apparently sometimes likes to think that we're robots.
Oh, okay.
So then after a
I don't know,
while, when
TikTok.
we just leave it live, then it's like, oh hi, let us know you're alive.
Oh, okay.
And so he puts the little puzzle on there. See, already we already
Yeah.
have to wrap this up.
That's
So he's actually going to be on here multiple times because there's so many different things that we want to talk about. And actually, the next episode when I have you on, I do actually want to talk about, because I know obviously we just got to the tip of talking about therapy, but you have done so many different forms of therapy. And I think it's really important that we discuss some of those and how you have evolved in that in terms of your healing journey. And then we're going to go on to talking about dating from a male's perspective, all of those things. So,
oh, boy.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for sharing your story and just, again, being humble and being transparent about your life and all that stuff and how we can use it for other people.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity. If I can say one thing, guys and
Yes.
gals, do know there's help out there. If there is ever anything where you feel down on yourself, do know there is a 988 number that you can contact, which is for the suicide prevention line.
Absolutely.
I feel that's very important to get that out there because a lot of people may not be comfortable talking, right? But know there's always somebody to talk to.
Yeah. And we'll go ahead. We'll put that on the email and the blog post and on our website for this specific podcast. So you'll find all of that information out at JohnetteCruz.com.